Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the latest episode of Real Take Real Estate with the Joseph team, where we give you our real take on today's housing market and everything that you need to know about real estate. I'm your host, Maddie Maloney, joined here with my partners,
Joe Sambear
and Sam Fada.
So today we are going to be diving into the exciting topic of construction. So this really is an exciting time because typically when people are looking at a construction loan or constructing their home, this is going to be their dream home. This is the time when they finally get to do it exactly how they want to, and it's super exciting. But there are going to be a couple more steps and a little bit more than what your typical mortgage is going to look like. So we want to dive into what that is, what the construction loan is, what the plans, specs and selection, and what the whole process looks like. So Sam, I want to start off with you. What does a construction loan, starting off, what does it all entail?
Sure. Thanks, Maddie. So there's two different ways you can go about it. So we spoke in a previous episode about vacant land and vacant land financing. So if you already own the land and you want to build your home on it, you'll start with finding a builder, obviously, that you like to work with, that's going to be able to give you what you want with your new home. Mm-hmm. Or you can look at doing it as a purchase if you don't have the vacant land and you're looking in, say, a development by a certain builder where each lot is already plotted out and you're ready to go on it. So that would be done as a purchase. So if you own the land, we would refinance it because you can't purchase something you already own, which that can be kind of a confusing point there. So really we would take the value of that land and build it into that construction loan financing. And then with the purchase, it would all be wrapped together as one. So the lot plus the build cost, we would do it as a new build. And then, during that process, it can be kind of similar to just doing it as a new purchase, whereas, you're obviously purchasing a new home, but it doesn't fully fund at closing. So the construction financing is really a line of credit. So if you do the line of credit for, say, $400,000, that gives the builder funds to draw from during construction. So if you do a loan for $400,000, it's not fully funding at that time. It's basically a line of credit for that builder to get their funds from as they continue each phase of the process. So really you would credit qualify, income qualify, assets qualify, just as you would with a new purchase, but the construction portion can be a little bit different there, as it doesn't fully fund. So
this one is one of the more difficult loans for people to visualize.
Wrap their head around.
Yeah. So what we do is if I'm sitting down with you, we're going to say, okay, you have the lot price. We have an idea of how much maybe price per square foot or whatever the builder may have laid out. Mm-hmm. Just put the two together and envision in your head, visually look and say, okay, I'm buying pretend like the home is built already. Mm-hmm. Just visualize the home is done. And this is the price you're paying. And then forget about the rest of the difference between the lot price and the construction price. And is my down payment on the lot price? Is my down payment on the construction price? Just don't even go there would be my recommendation. Mm-hmm. We're just going to look at the total picture because that's how we're going to treat this. That's how we're going to appraise it. That's how your down payment's going to be based on. There's obviously a few other things, like if you owned the land before, you might be able to take advantage of the increase in value. Those are kind of outliers a little
mm-hmm.
bit. But generally speaking, this is a house, pretend it's built. And,
mm-hmm.
and if you visualize that this home is built, then everything gets a little bit easier, especially if you've bought a home before.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because then you're thinking, okay, well, my payments can be based on this. My down payments can be based on the total price. Mm-hmm. That can be, I think, very helpful.
Yeah.
So just to confirm, you don't have to buy the land, go to closing, and then go on the construction and then close then. This is all going to be in a one-time, everything wrapped in together.
That would be ideal, Maddie, if you have, especially if the builder owns the land or if the landowner is willing to give you the time to do that. Sometimes we have to, so if it's a very marketable property and the seller wants to sell it quickly and the builder doesn't have control of that, sometimes you do have to make it a two-step process. But ideally, especially going into a development where the builder already has rights to that land, they might not even own it, but they have the rights, the option to develop it. that is the ideal situation. We close the land and the construction all at one-time close up front, no additional closings necessary. There is, in the mortgage world, there's something called a two-time closing, where you actually close, like Sam indicated, this like conceptually this line of credit, and then you got to close again on a permanent mortgage once the home is built. But what we're talking about here is construction to permanent, meaning it's all one step. We close up front. Everything's done before the shovel hits the ground. You physically go to closing as if you're buying the house that, and again, visualize that it's built. So you're going to the closing just as if the home's built. It's clearly not. And we're going to take it from there. It's all one opportunity.
So you actually get the financing before the home is built. So you would pay your closing costs, get everything all wrapped up. Once you have those final plans and specifications with your builder, we'll close within 30 to 45 days of that, and then everything is settled at that point. You're not going to have to pay closing costs again or redo anything when the home's actually complete. Everything's all done up front.
Great. So, Sam, I'm going to touch on what you just mentioned there. You said once you have your final plans and specifications. So, really, what does that process look like for the borrower?
Sure. So when you've selected your builder and figured out how you want to move forward, you'll likely, choose how you want the home to look, which plans the builder has available, and then you'll pick your selections like, countertops, appliances, all that fun stuff that people like to choose from. And then from there, we'll get that total value, like Joe mentioned, the lot plus all the plans and everything you've added in, and we'll take that as one. That's going to be the final purchase price. And then from there, we would do an appraisal as if the home were complete according to those plans. So we're already going to get that value up front in that market, showing, you're building a home that's for what it's worth, basically. So we don't want that value to come in low, if you're building more than, if you have more costs than what it's actually worth. That's why we do that appraisal up front before the home's actually built. And then, from there, we just head on into the process similar to a new purchase with the processing, underwriting, and all that information. So the plans and specifications are getting those blueprints, all your selections that you want in your new home, and then moving forward from there. That's really when that construction financing starts.
And I think there's about 3 different levels of customization typically that we see. There's maybe they're building very similar condos, and they're going to give you 3 choices. You're going to get to pick the countertops, the color, and maybe the cabinets or something like that. Then you'll get into like semi-customization where you literally you go to maybe their builder's studio and they have everything lined out. You're picking a carpet, garage doors, everything. Then you'll get really customized building where you're not even going to a studio, you're going to maybe a plumbing supply company, and then they're sending you to a lighting company. Then and then you really can. So there's kind of 3 different levels, I would say, and every builder's, when you start doing that research, if you really want a certain level, you really should determine that then, because if you work outside of their process, then you can get into some really expensive change orders. You can get to really, the build time changes dramatically. It just doesn't go really well when you try to do a real customization in a builder that doesn't do a lot of customization.
Exactly.
So I think, again, making sure you're with the right builder, the right, hopefully your realtor partner who's helping you with this, again, back to the trusted experts, are putting you with the one that fits what your dream home purchase or build looks like. Also, I think this is a good time to, vet your builder as far as getting references from the realtor, getting references from homes they've built already. Sometimes they'll even get it from suppliers like the lumber yards and so on. It'd be good to talk to someone who's built with them recently to see what their experience was.
Yes. Not every builder is going to be the same, and they're not going to give you the same level of service. And so it is so, so important to make sure that the person who's going to be building your home is going to be well established and going to, make sure that they're going to make this your perfect dream home that you've, spent so much time thinking and planning about and saving up for. You want this to be exactly what you have dreamed of. And so that's why, as your lender or with your realtor, we have worked with so many builders before. We know who is reputable, who is going to make this an easy process, who's going to live up to the expectations that they lay down. So really just great to make sure that you are double checking, not just reviews online, but also getting the opinions of people who have worked with these people in the past.
And those 3 levels of services all have pros and cons. So the pro of not having a lot of choices is the cost is usually lower because they can streamline it. So there's nothing wrong with that. And some people don't want to make a lot of choices. So there's all 3 of those have really good benefits, and there's some negative things, of course, with those as well.
Definitely. Okay, great. So we kind of went over, what the process of the construction loan looks like, whether you own the land or you don't own the land. We went over what the plans, specs, and selections look like. Joe, do you want to touch on a little bit more of what the process then looks like? If there's any modification afterwards, or what all encompasses that?
Yeah, I'll walk you through the time frame and you guys can interject, but we start with a pre-qualification, pre-approval process that's just like buying an existing home. We're going to qualify you the same way. The one little difference is we're going to estimate the taxes. We have to estimate them a little differently. The future taxes, of course, and we will walk you through that process. And again, we want you to make good decisions. So we're going to lay out what we think the payment's going to be, what the rate looks like, what the rate environment is, what down payment, money to close is going to look like. We'll walk you through that normal process. The next step is you will go back to, like Sam indicating, picking your builder, getting your plans and specs, and we'll be just waiting for that information. We'll have some ideas and make some estimates in the meanwhile. Once we get that, we'll update it and start our normal loan process. It's really going to be just like any other loan process as far as the processing and underwriting. We have, previous episodes that get really in depth on that. It'll follow the same process because again, we're processing as if it's a home that's like built and existing already. That's how the whole processing will work. We will look to see if it's in a flood zone. If the land is, that could be a surprise sometimes, especially on like custom acreage or that's near a stream or water. It's really important to identify, are you building in a floodplain? That's a really critical thing also to look out for. And then we're going to go to closing, as we talked about, you're going to bring your down payment, your closing costs, everything to the closing table, sign the documents. It's a permanent, there can be no change. Once that closing occurs, there can be no future changes. So you're going to sign all the documents. After that, the lot will get transferred right at closing. So you will become the owner of the land. That will be the first draw. Sam mentioned we're going to do draws. That'll be the first distribution is the land. You'll become the owner. You'll be responsible for the taxes from that day on. Moving forward, every time the builder wants to use some of that line of credit, that loan amount, they will request a draw from us. To do that, they will send us a official request. They will have lien waivers a lot of times, that if it's required for the title company. And we will send the appraiser, the same appraiser that did the original appraisal, will go out and do the inspections. And what they're looking at, they're looking to see, does the draw match up to the percentage of completion? So if they're asking for X dollar amount, is that in the ballpark of how much work is actually completed? We don't want the builder to get too far ahead taking loan proceeds for work that's not completed. So we're very careful on that. So typically I would say most times there's, 3 to 7 draws. 5 is pretty standard, I'd say.
Yeah. So really the builder is reimbursing themselves as they complete each phase.
Yep, and pay their vendors. Yep. So typically it's, they do it at foundation, they do it framing, they do it drywall. They have different times they're going to request that funds. Then the last draw is called the final draw, and that's always held back until all the work's completed. So that final draw, going to that final week of work being completed, then they're going to have to give us the certificate of occupancy from the township or city, indicating the home is habitable and you can occupy it. It might be a temporary certificate of occupancy because sometimes there's weather-related issues like a sidewalk or a tree or a deck. So the certificate of occupancy, their final draw request with lien waivers, and then the appraisal has to come in. The appraiser has to go back one more time for the final approval, like final draw approval. So that those 3 things are accomplished. The funds are released to the builder. You move into the property. So that's one huge misconception is there has to be another closing.
Yeah, but there's not.
And the builders refer to it as, sometimes the builders say, hey, we're going to your closing. It's not really a closing. It's a construction wrap-up meeting where they may give you a notebook with all the warranties and all the information about the house and go through a lot of details. This is how you work this and do this. It's not a closing because there is no financial movement of funds at that time. Usually there's something called the modification, because now we have to flip this like a switch from a line of credit to a permanent mortgage. That's a 30-year amortization or 15-year amortization or whatever the term is. And we already know the rate, the highest rate possible from the beginning. So when you sign those closing documents, you have a rate on there. When we go to modify, if that loan type is acceptable for conventional financing, we're securitizing it with Fannie or Freddie, and that rate is lower, depending on your loan product, you may have the opportunity to actually lower your rate at modification, but it'll never be higher than the rate you at closing. So that's how the modification process works, is we will contact you when you're actually living in the house. Usually it's the first 2 weeks that you're living there. We'll send you an email saying, hey guys, now it's time to come back. And first question we're going to ask you is, would you like to pay down the loan? What is the final loan amount going to be? Can't be more than what we closed at, but you can bring more funds into closing, which is very common because they may have sold the property, they may have saved up money. So we're going to have you come back into the office, sign a couple pages. It's called a modification to the mortgage. There's no cost involved. It's going to take 10 minutes to come in and sign this document, and then we'll set up your first true principal and interest escrow payment. If you have an escrow account, the escrow amount is going to be due at the modification date. You'll bring a check in for the escrows for the future taxes and insurance, because we do not hold escrows during the construction period. And that will wrap it up. And then essentially what will happen is usually it's a month and a half or so before you start making your regular payments. You don't skip anything. You'll still have to keep paying the interest only on that line of credit right up until the new payment occurs.
Yeah, so that's the big thing during the actual draw process, is it's just an interest only payment. So you're not making that full payment. Your principal balance isn't changing. It's actually growing as the builder takes draws. That balance is going to grow, and you're going to owe more interest during the time period where the builder's actually constructing your home. And then when you flip to that modification process, once we have the certificate of occupancy and everything's complete, that's when you actually start making your full term payments.
Perfect. And so, Joe, you touched kind of on one of the misconceptions that I commonly hear with construction loans, is that, there's no cost or anything that you have to bring to the modification. That doesn't mean that you don't have to bring any funds. At that point, if you do have an escrow account, you will have to bring the funds to fund that escrow account for your taxes and insurance. So it's not a cost, but you may be required to bring funds at that time. So that's just one misconception that I know sometimes people have, is that, they thought that they brought that during the first initial closing, but we're not paying those taxes and insurance during the construction process. That starts once it's modified, when you're moving into the home.
And that's one thing to be mindful of too, because you actually own that lot. You are responsible for those tax bills during that time, because you're not paying into that escrow account. You own that land while the home's being constructed. So you'll have to, watch out for those tax bills coming due, because you are that property owner. So that's
a few other things you might have to pay for during the construction process would be any amount of interest on what's been used by the builder. So, that first draw we talked about was the lot. You'll be paying interest only. That next month you'll get a bill from the closing date to the end of that month, and that will continue to rise as the builder requests funds. And then if you have mortgage insurance, you'll be most likely paying mortgage insurance during construction. We didn't touch about this too much, but we do have some low down payment options. That's a big misconception. I have to put 20% down for new construction. That's really not accurate. Usually it follows Fannie and Freddie's guidelines for down payment. So if there's a 5% down payment available for a primary residence, usually for new construction, it follows that guideline. So you can build with a lower down payment. That's probably one of the biggest misconceptions, I would say.
And we have touched on this before when we talked about vacant land, but if you have equity in a property that you already purchased, say you purchased that vacant land, you put 20% down, that 20% can be used to count towards that 5% needed for the construction. So that's really great, as we talked about with the vacant land. If you aren't ready to build just yet, but you do want to secure a property, you can go ahead, secure that now, put your 20% down, and then know that you will be able to use that as part of your 5% down when you want to begin the construction process. So are there any other misconceptions that maybe you guys have that people come to, or just general questions that people have about the construction loan?
One thing I'll say is warning, big time warning. When you get into the customization, I would say the one biggest concern I have as a lender and looking out for our customers is change orders, of being on the same page with your builder of how this process is going to work. Are we going to get a bill at closing, or like when they have that wrap up meeting, is the builder going to slide a piece of paper over to you saying you owe us $20,000? That this has happened before, so this is why I'm bringing it up. We want to really make sure there's a lot of clarity, understand that contract, understand the change orders, understand when you say, can we just move this way? What does that mean? And are you paying for it? Are you going to get a change order immediately saying, yes, if you want to do X, it's going to cost this much and you're going to pay this much for it? But I think you need to get yourself a lot of clarity, especially with site preparation when they actually do the foundation. Sometimes on a 3-acre parcel that's vacant land, the builder might not really realize what the soil is like or the drain field, or you want to really just get into a lot of detail on this and make sure you're protecting yourself in this contract, and having trusted people, advisors that know what they're doing in regards to that, maybe even legal sometimes, to make sure you're protected from these kind of change orders, because that can be a very, very challenging thing to deal with, because we really can't, even if we think there's perception of increased value or anything, there's really nothing we can do that last day. If they say you owe us X dollar amount, we really can't help at that point. It's too late. So we want to make sure all that stuff's done in advance and make sure the allowances are enough to cover what's going to happen.
Definitely.
Makes sense.
Sam, any other common questions or misconceptions that people have when looking at a construction loan?
Not necessarily. That, I guess there's, the big one is it's just that word construction loan kind of could freak people out, thinking, oh my gosh, it's a whole big ordeal. But a lot of it, back to what Joe said, looking at it as the lot and the purchase price, envisioning that it's already complete, and we'll help with the rest. We'll take care of all that, answer any questions you have throughout the process. But really, once you get that overall concept of how it works, as we've discussed, it'll really, be more clear for you to get through the process.
And if you are doing, one last thing, if you are doing a existing home, and you're making a major, you maybe putting a second addition on, or a tear down rebuild or something like this, it's going to follow pretty much the same formatting, and we can do that as well and get to that kind of discussion as well. But it's going to follow the same process that we talked about in a lot of ways.
So again, with everything that we've been saying, it just goes back to making sure that you have a trusted team that is going to walk you through and make sure that you are aware of everything that could possibly go wrong, everything that you need to be aware of with the construction process, with the loan process, and just making sure that everyone has your best interests in mind so that there are no surprises and that you are fully comfortable and ready to move into hopefully what is going to be your dream home and maybe your forever home. That's why it's just so exciting when we get into the construction process that typically people have that mindset of, this is going to be my perfect dream home that I'm going to live in for the rest of my life. So it really is an exciting time. Do not be afraid of a construction loan or think that it's not feasible or not possible, that you have to have 20% down payment. There's low down payment options. It may, and maybe in this market with the low inventory market, maybe it's something that you should consider. So get with your lender, maybe see what advice they have on the construction loan, what builders they recommend, what great realtors to work with during this process. So really, if you have any questions about the construction loan, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We are happy to help. We have preferred partners that we work with in Michigan, also in Florida. So, we're here to help with that. So thank you again for tuning in to today's episode of Real Take Real Estate, where we went over everything that you need to know about the construction loan. You know, the plans, the specs, the process, everything that could possibly go wrong, misconceptions. So if you liked today's episode, please consider subscribing, leaving us a review, or sharing it with your fellow homeowners or someone that may be considering constructing their new home. So stay tuned for more insightful episodes on all things real estate, and we hope to have you on next time. Thank you so much.